Hello, today I'm speaking with Gary Stuart, a constellation facilitator and author of Many Hearts, One Soul, an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger. Welcome, Gary.
Great, thank you very much.
So what is a constellation work?
Well, Constellation was developed by Bert Hellinger many years ago. We'll speak about that later, but just so the audience knows, we do it in a group process where people represent either relatives or the issues of whatever the client is working on. There's a conscious field that opens up, and that takes us to what the source of the problem really is. So they're coming to me with financial issues, career issues, romantic issues, but the field takes us into grief or loss or some tragedy that happened in the family's ancestry. So we work with that tragedy, the grief or loss, to bring it to completion, because that's something the client's been carrying unconsciously. Somehow it's manifest as financial problems in their current life or romantic problems. So by going to the source, we're releasing the energy that is kind of stuck or frozen in the family history, so it can be eliminated, or transformed would be a better word. So we can transform it, hence the client's goal of better finances, romance, career, whatever their goal was, can be met because the life force will be there to support it.
What if some of their problems are with other family members? Does that
Then
work
that
too?
true field, in my own life, when I was experiencing the work many years ago, about 14 years ago, when I attended my first workshop, long before I became a facilitator, my mother had anger issues her whole life. She was a rageaholic her whole life. And after we were working on the work, we saw that there was deep sadness and loss over some abuse issues that she encountered as a little girl. That showed up in the field without her being present. That's what's amazing. So whatever she went through in her lifetime, me being a child of her, I'm carrying all that pain and everything that she went through just by the mere fact I gestated in this woman called my mother. So I'm carrying her pain to the second generation after she received it in her own childhood.
So that's sort of the point of the work, is to put an end to it so we don't have to pass that on to
Yes,
another
the goal of
generation.
the work isn't to recreate a psychodrama of our parents suffering or grandparents or great-grandparents. We have access to time and space quite unbelievably. We can go back hundreds of years to where it really started. But the goal is to, number one, finish it because it's really in the past. So some people say, well, why are you going in the past, blah, blah, blah. And I'm there, no, we're not going to recreate the past. We're going to finish the past. That way we're not carrying all these past dramas in our energetic conscious field that are pulling us back from having the love we want in our life, having the career we want. So we're basically, Hellinger calls it negative entanglements. So we're entangled with something of a different time and place that's stopping us from living fully. We're kind of resolving it, cutting the cords, the negative cords. We still have the positive cords so that we can be fully present in life to make our dreams come true.
Well, you refer to Hellinger. Bert Hellinger is
Yes.
the developer of this work. You say he developed this back in the late 60s, actually?
Way back when, yes. He was originally a Catholic priest stationed in a mission in Zulu, Africa. I think he really learned about ancestors from the African tribes, which is the origin of the human species. And then he became a psychotherapist when he became disenchanted with the church and started investing in all different kinds of psychological healing, none of which he felt got really good results. So somehow he created this synthesis called constellation work, and part of the name constellation is when you look at stars in the sky, you see a picture of Orion, a hunter, a bear, a Big Dipper, whatever you see. And in the constellation field, we have the people in the field expressing your subconscious limitations from your family system, and it's showing you a picture of what the real issue is. So this way we see a picture with the total strangers in the room that might not even know the client's last name, giving us a picture of what the real source of their unhappiness or lack of financial well-being or soured relationships. And it's changing everyone in the room while it's working in the client simultaneously.
Well, I know this work is very popular in Europe, where it originated. Again, your book, Many Hearts, One Soul, is an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger. Why do you think this work hasn't been as popular here in America?
Well, in America, the fact that we left Europe, our roots, and came to America on the Mayflower, and we kind of turned our backs on our history because it was too painful. So one aspect of it, that it's slower to take root in America, is, I think, because we rejected our ancestors in Europe, whether it be the potato famine in Ireland, things happening in Italy. I mean, there's World War One, of course, where most ancestors came over here before World War Two. But we just find a lot of people who come to the work, even African Americans who originated in Africa, whose ancestors were slaves. We get a lot of unfinished issues from all different cultures. And it's good to know world history. When you work with people from Poland, you have to know that it was invaded by Russia, took Poland over, then Germany took Poland over, so they were just like ping-ponging back and forth as a nation. And whenever I work on Poland, there's a lot of national shame. So all the Polish jokes that emanated in American society anyway are from them being like moved back and forth in different wars and uprisings. So there's like a national shame that people in Poland have that maybe other nations don't have. In Germany, there's perpetrator energy because they formed the Nazi Party, the SS, and all the atrocities that were done in the Holocaust. So almost the culture has a sense of guilt or remorse from what they did in these events in human history as well. So we're working culturally as well as individually with the collective family, but the national family, and then of course the human race all at once experiencing these things.
Well, it's fascinating work. How did you touched on this a little bit before, how did you first discover this work?
Well, somebody had advertised, Margot, very good friend of mine, she had advertised in Whole Life Times, and she said, what if the pain you're carrying isn't yours? And I was there like, wow, what a concept that is. And I said, I got to learn about this because I already was in alternative healing massage and body work that I do, but I felt my clients were carrying something in their body because why would it release for a week and then come back as strong? And I was getting intuitive impulses that stuff was carried in the body that wasn't physical, it was emotional baggage being carried in there, chronic shoulder issue or chronic leg issue, and that just dovetailed perfectly in my own healing journey to go a bit deeper to find out what the source of somebody's problem was being carried in their body.
So when you're doing this work, you get all sorts of insights as a representative as well
Yes.
as a facilitator.
So my first big workshop long before I was a facilitator, she invited me to Brentwood. Somebody was doing a demonstration in a living room, and the person felt she didn't know who she was in life. She just felt like this orphaned waif, even though she wasn't. And so we set it up, and all the attention kind of went to me. And I was put in as her great-grandfather from Lithuania. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I felt I understood everything about this man, that he was a farmer, the soil was depleted, all his children left for the New World because it just was an economic disaster in Lithuania at that place and time, and he died depressed on his farm that couldn't even grow food. Now the irony to that, I'm not Lithuanian, I don't know that woman's last name, and I had such a vivid experience. This person had to die at least by 1890, if not 1860. How could information come through me so strongly from 1860, and we're talking it's the year 2000 here. It's like I felt I understood life, death, time, space, all at once. It was just this pivotal moment in my life where I said I had access to total consciousness of a person I don't even know their last name. And it was so it just was so heartfelt and real. And by the end of the constellation process, the closure for her was hugging me and her knowing that she was Lithuanian first. And she discovered that what was missing in her life is knowing she was Lithuanian and connected to her Lithuanian past, even though she's in America living in Santa Monica feeling disconnected. And I still get tears in my eyes even repeating it, and that's 14 years later. It was so deeply moving. And it taught me so much. The exciting thing about this is we also have access to the dead. In shamanistic cultures, all of humanity healing was done by shamans up until Western medicine, which is the new kid on the block for the past 200 years. And they would go to the spirit world to see what was missing inside somebody. Well, with this work, in a way, it's shamanistic that we're going to the spirit world to see what is incomplete, what needs to be finished, so the client doesn't have to manifest a disease, doesn't have to manifest poverty. Whatever negative thing is manifesting, we can transform the conscious energy of the family system and the family history so that that's not dragging them back to the past. They can be fully present to make their dreams come true, whatever that dream is.
Well, it's a fascinating book. Again, it's Many Hearts, One Soul, an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger. And you talk in here about transforming the negative energy of your past, of your family system, so it doesn't pull you back but supports you
Yes.
to help move you forward into the future. Is that
Yeah,
the main
absolutely.
goal of the...
Well, one thing Hellinger term which is really good, it's called invisible dynamics, and they're like invisible strings pulling us back. And you start to see that we think we're of free will and choice, which indeed we are on one level. On another level, we're trying to repeat our ancestral patterns that are like an invisible blueprint that we're following unconsciously. The great thing about this work is we become fully conscious of the blueprint, of the pattern, of the entanglement as we're resolving it and releasing it. So the goal is to move the client forward, not yanked back by something they can't see. And what amazes me and most people who come to the work, I didn't even know I was carrying this. I didn't know my mother was carrying that. I didn't know I was carrying it. And it's ironic in that how could people that have died 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago affect our conscious being in the present moment without them even being here? And what's even more amazing is how could a grandfather we didn't meet because he or she might have died when we were born, so we never met this person, but we're carrying their traumas and dramas of their life in our present life, and we never met this person that we're carrying that energy for. So it shows you how it's time and space are irrelevant, as I do a lot of distance work, we'll talk about at the end. And also, what really drew me to the work is heaven and earth are intersecting during any given workshop. And it's such a sacred place to be because these dead ancestors are coming through living bodies of total strangers to communicate their pain, to communicate their suffering, all for the benefit of their great-grandchild working so they won't have to suffer.
Well, we're certainly carrying their DNA, so
Yes.
it certainly makes sense that we'd be carrying drama or trauma or things
Yes,
for
yes.
them too.
So I find, I mean, a lot of people, I'm in disagreement with people say, I'm going to come to my workshop, I'm going to give you 5 strands of DNA and you'll be healed. Our body is made of 2 strands of DNA. Sure, they split and replicate into skin cells, stem cells, or whatever, but how can someone give you extra DNA when your body functions on DNA? So I'm in disagreement with some of the New Age
I think we have enough DNA.
people. Yeah, we have more than enough. But what I think is undiscovered and what's finally being discovered and validated by science is there's an epigenetic field around the DNA that's an energetic field that contains information that triggers the DNA, yes, for cancer, yes, for diabetes, yes, for good health. And I've done some experiments with people with serious diseases to test that out, and indeed I found their DNA triggers changed after we did the work and released the trauma.
Well, you use the term epigenetics. Is that like the physical study of the
That
energy?
is new. Greg Venter, who was the first person who dissected the human genome, his own, of course. Why not? He's working on it. They have scientifically proven that there's an energetic field or conscious field around every piece of DNA that triggers it to go on or go off. And he said it takes 1 or 2 years to figure out the physical genome. He thinks it's going to take 50 years to find out the epigenetic field around DNA that's invisible. So one of my insights that I really get with all this work, do we really ever own our DNA? Sure, it's here right now, we have a body, but we're going to pass into spirit. And is it just something that's shared generation after generation? So they pass on the gift of life to this generation, then either they do or don't pass on life to the next generation, but we're all really continually living in spirit, and we just have this human experience by the passing on of DNA, which is kind of interesting to look at life that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you first discovered this work, did you become a facilitator right away? You mentioned back in 2000. Did you start
Yes,
training?
I started training immediately. I was in the first training session. A gentleman, Heinz Stark, my original facilitator trainer, came to Los Angeles and did a 2-year program. But he said we could start leading workshops after our first week. So I had been facilitating while I was in my training, renting rooms. I was just so scientifically excited about this, not to mention emotionally and spiritually, that I just dove right in because because I want to learn more. I'm hungry for knowledge and enjoy the knowledge that I receive. And more than that, the profound ways we're helping people is what's just so incredible. And everyone should know about this, hence is why we're doing this.
Well, you're also double certified, right? Because you actually took the
Yes,
training from the man
Hellinger
himself.
did his first training. He's 86 now, and he felt before he passes on he wanted to certify people. And he calls his version of the work spirit mind now, because he feels we're going into that level of consciousness that's beyond our DNA, and it's more in the spirit realm. So we still have the physical constellation work, but we're much aware of the spiritual influence of our ancestors and spirit on our DNA as we pass through time and space.
Well, does he do? He doesn't do trainings in America. You went to Austria.
Yeah,
for the
I went to
training?
Austria for 6 weeks of training in about a year and a half. So every 6 months I went for a week or two in Austria. It was absolutely a wonderful experience, and I learned so much, and it was just a thrill to learn this in Europe from the master. The great thing about the work, none of us. This is a paradox. None of us have any answers. I don't know what's going to happen for anyone who comes to me for help. But the group of people who represent their primary issue, that field of consciousness opens up and it's teaching us all. So it's almost like the room is filled with a benevolent force, and that force is giving us all the information on the silver platter. Here, this is what your client's issue is. I couldn't dream up the stuff that shows up, but yet it shows up.
Well, I know your clients definitely feel changed at the end
Yes.
of the evening. What are some of the things that change for them? What are some of the goals that they...
Health issues. I did some humanitarian work to challenge the DNA theories. There was a very dear great niece of a friend of actually both of ours, and his great niece had a rare form of leukemia. Now we did this work distant. She lives in Phoenix. And what showed up in her field, we were working on a rare form of, did I say leukemia? I meant to say hemophilia.
Yeah, well, there are issues
Sorry
in the
about
family
that.
system. I
There's
know.
also leukemia in the family system, hence my mistake. Anyway, so we were working on that, and what showed up in her field, now mind you, this is an 11-year-old girl who's been stricken out of the blue with a disease she didn't know she had. What showed up is that she was an in utero triplet, and that she had missed her other two siblings in the womb who were with her. The mother has no recollection of that. She has no conscious recollection of it. That's what showed up with her leukemia. Now, since we've done the work with her, we did a couple other things with her as well. This was all gratis to test out my DNA theory and the spirit around the DNA. That's why I did it, so I could test it out in the field. The mother had fibromyalgia symptoms that disappeared after we did the work. She's still taking clotting factor, but she went from 3 clotting factors a week to 3 clotting factors per year. So her DNA is starting to trigger back on the clotting factor that she had the first 10 years of her life. What triggered it off at 11 years old? When she entered puberty, boom, hemorrhaging started. You touch her and she could hemorrhage to death.
So this work or recognition of her family system or what was missing in her family system.
Yes.
specifically
We
the
completed something invisible that her body is reacting to and expressing itself as hemophilia in this particular family system. So if we look at any of our families that we emanate from, look at the diseases. You see generational heart disease, generational cancer, any myriad of things, that's being shared. So what we do, someone comes to us with a disease, I cannot guarantee we're going to heal it, cure it, or anything. But what I do know is we're going to almost energetically release the causes that made that happen. And it's up to the person's body, and there could be a force that can't be changed, and we're fine with that. So we're humble to the bigger forces that are expressing something through disease. But if a client wants help to understand why am I stricken with this, then we can go into the field and say, this is what showed up. So one woman just a couple weeks ago, she had malignant melanoma in her left leg. She called me. She had come years ago before she had melanoma in her leg. And one of her family historical things is she had 4 abortions before she got married. As a young girl, starting at 16, she aborted children with different men. So her field clearly showed she has to say goodbye to those men and acknowledge that she was a parent with them, even though they never got married or raised their children. Let that go, and then complete that and be with her current husband with her 2 living children. So we reestablished the order of love. I want to make sure we talk about that. That her history, we finished it, And she's had tremendous pain in her leg ever since she had the surgery. The pain hasn't went away in a year. She had surgery about a year ago. Luckily, they caught it all, but she's been in intense pain. I had called her the next morning. I said, "So how you doing?" And she said, "There's no pain in my body." And I said, "Remember what we were working on last night?" She said, "Oh my God." She said, "I didn't connect how I feel today had any correlation." Now, this woman is in San Diego, and we're doing the work in LA without her present. And her body responded while she was sleeping to be pain-free. So what was her malignant melanoma expressing in her left leg, which is where the pain was? It was unfinished business with the fathers of those aborted children or miscarried. It doesn't have to always be an abortion. It could be a miscarried, stillborn child. There's energy in that life force and trauma and drama and grief that gets carried in the woman's body or the man, with the man who impregnated the woman.
Well, that's what this work does at its best. Is the energy trickles out like tossing a pond in a
Ripples
stone
in a pond, yes.
and it ripples out because energetically. So you don't have to be there. You do energy work, distance work as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so the client doesn't even have to be present as long as I have their permission and their desires and goal, and I do have a questionnaire as what traumatic events happen in their family system. That's all I need to go on. I have no idea what show up. I trust the field, so I write for a publication in England called a Knowing Field. And that's what we call this work. There's a knowing field, a benevolent field of consciousness that shows up in any given workshop, and that's what has the answers. And it gives us the answers on a silver platter. And sometimes we're very humble. I mean, we don't view disease as bad. And not that we want our clients to be sick and die, but we don't view anything that happens in life. We try to hold a non-judgmental, true unconditional love. What if disease or death is the resolution for something tragic that happened in the family system? So we view that as sometimes that's necessary, say for the person's spiritual growth. So we don't try to play God here, like, oh, I can heal diseases and blah, blah, blah. We respect the unknown forces of life with deep gratitude and humility. Because to be arrogant and say, oh, I'll cure cancer, I'll do that, number one, we don't. And number two, what we can do is take apart the energetic components that are leading to the disease. And if we do that and resolve something really deep, does the trauma have to express itself as disease? Can there be a different probable future for that person?
So it opens the door for some change.
It opens the door for change, and it changes the energy. It just happened to be, we were working on another case of skin cancer on the shoulder. People come to me with very heavy cases, and her uncle had just died of it. The mother, who was the person working, had something cut off her shoulder, and her daughter just got something on her right shoulder. When we set up the family system, we went back to the other side of the room, easily 10 generations, where there was incest in probably a great-great-great-grandfather, something between a mother, daughter, and father. 10 generations ago. The client would have no memory of it, but it led us to sexual impropriety of some ancient generation in their family system. And that's where skin cancer took us back there to sexual abuse, maybe in the 1880s in their family system, whatever country they emanated from, that's what showed up. So we went back to the corner of the room and worked with the trouble in the marriage and the negative energy with all that, so the energy could be clear in their body so it wouldn't have to manifest as skin cancer anymore. So I'm not afraid to go into heavy, dark places if that comes to me, and I find I get clients with really tough cases, and it's almost like the ancestral field trusts me that I can hold anything, even if it's dark energy, with unconditional love, so it can release and heal. Because I sincerely believe our ancestral field does not like seeing us suffer.
Well, it seems that seems to be a key to this work is
Yes.
inclusion. Is not excluding something or a dark sheep, or you mentioned abortions or that sort of thing. The key seems to be to include that so that we can move on and not carry.
One of Hellinger's biggest insights is, if we really can wrap our heads around this, is that everything belongs. So if I'm working on a Jewish person who has current issues, health issues, financial issues, whatever, and we're going into a Holocaust issue, we would include Nazism. We would include the SS as part of their family. So Hellinger takes the large view, which is one of the first people to do that. Most people are rejecting who caused pain. We're embracing it. How could it be any different? How could you be a Jewish person who had family die in the Holocaust and not include the SS energy?
That perpetrator energy has become part of the family
Yes,
system.
it's invaded the family through a violent act, and it becomes part of the family system. So we may work with SS perpetrator energy when I'm working with a Jewish person. They may not be happy about that, but I said, this is part of your history now. It can't be undone. Your grandfather died from this person, so we're going to give the dark energy a place with your ancestor, and it neutralizes. When it's like polarity, you put the negative and the positive, boom, all of a sudden there's no repulsion, it's just peace. So we're trying to end the Holocaust now for any Jewish person who comes to me, so they're not carrying on what happened with Hitler and their grandfather and grandmother in World War II in the present moment. That finally becomes the past, and they can be fully alive as a Jew present without all this stuff pulling them back to the drama of World War II.
And it's important that they don't try to forgive. Hellinger talks
Yes.
about not forgiving, including instead of forgiving, because when you forgive, what does he say about that?
Well, when you forgive somebody, it makes you too big. So part of the orders of love
You mentioned that before,
that he
orders of
calls
love,
is that we start, our ancestors came here, then our parents came, say great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and then us. So there's a descending order of love that's also called an order of hierarchy. I believe it's by Maslow. Came up with that way back in the 30s. And when you say that I'm going to forgive all of you, you're this little being down here saying, I'm going to forgive all of you for what you did, that is so arrogant because you're the tiniest one. How can the tiniest one forgive all these great ones who might have lived through World War II or some horrible experience? So what Hellinger has found, if we can say, I accept whether it's a perpetrator or you're my family, I accept all the junk I went through with you, even as a family member, mother, father, whatever, and then you turn away and you leave it with them. So that way, you're accepting your fate by having this experience with your human family or with the SS, whatever the trauma is. Then you turn away free of it and walk forward, and you let them carry the guilt, the shame, the grief that wasn't even yours to carry. So that's one of the bigger healing movements that we work with, letting the people who own the bad stuff carry it so we don't have to.
They're big enough to carry it, and I'm too
They're
small
big
to carry
enough.
it. It's actually a very healing thing to
Yes,
say.
yes. And it also frees us. That's the biggest negative entanglement. We're trying to fight the battles of people that are dead and gone, and we don't have to. But by letting them carry it, and when we come into the work and our ancestors show up, some of them, we might lay an ancestor on the floor. If there's a lot of grief in the family, we'll lay a person on the floor to be a dead person. And a living person representing a dead person gets so much spiritual information, number one. You don't have to die to get that information. It's readily available. But at the same time, we know if they're laying on the floor and they're not at peace because they see their great-grandchild suffering, we try to do stuff as facilitators in the group to get that person to a place of peace. More often than not, when they get put to rest, when their grandchild can turn its back to them, say goodbye, whatever the case might be, and just walk forward away from them. Then they know their job is done, and they don't have to stay in the earth plane with their great-grandchild who's continuing their suffering. They can go play in the heaven realm and not worry about what's going on earth. So it creates a healthy boundary between the living and dead, between health and sickness, between negative entanglements and the positive aspects of life. And we do it all with unconditional love.
And you mentioned, again, in your book, Many Hearts, One Soul, that, I don't keep plugging this book, but it's a wonderful book. You mentioned that we are our ancestors' dreams come true. They don't want us to carry that stuff.
Exactly. They know they lived and died with it. So, if you use World War II, the Jewish Holocaust as a paradigm, something to learn from, if they see their grandchildren suffering with an event that they didn't even live through. Here's the epigenetic field again. How could Jewish people who were born in America of ancestors who died in Auschwitz or Treblinka or whatever carry all that pain as if they were in Auschwitz, and here they're in America a century later? So what's wrong with this picture here? So we try to create the healthy boundary to finish it there, and the ancestors are actually much happier that, it's finally over. I don't have to watch her suffer or carry my pain. And the other side, we start to see the links. this gives you a very wide, a bigger picture of life and death. So I wouldn't be here today. So my father was a soldier in the American Army in World War II, and he killed a lot of young Nazis and came home and populated the baby boom. So here we have a planet in global war, World War II, which is pretty big, and here I have a father who survived it by killing lots of people. He comes home with all the other soldiers and creates a baby boom. So here our American soldiers saw great death and trauma in Europe. Then they come over and they create 78 million children in 12 to 15 years. So is me being one of those baby boomers, how much of my life do I owe to those Germans dying in my father's hands? So I consider the Nazi men that my father had killed in World War II as fallen brothers. I include them in my family system and in my heart as missing brothers. Ironically, I had 6 sisters, so at least I have some brothers there. But I wouldn't be here. There might be a German facilitator talking today that he had killed my father,
Right.
and I never got to incarnate. So part of my, we go in the bigger fields, part of my incarnation is around the drama of World War II and Nazism and Auschwitz and just everything else that happened there. Now, if you look at another level of what's not commonly seen in the world around World War II, our soldiers, how does death stimulate sexuality? They saw great death and horror in World War II, and they come back and had sex like rabbits, creating 78 million children. It's the largest population that was ever created on Earth at one given moment in time. And what about seeing death, destruction, and horror led to sexual impulses being expressed, creating a flower of 78 million children after they saw millions die? Right in front of
You
them
mentioned
in World War
the yin
II.
and yang of that in your book. You talk about tornadoes,
Yeah.
destruction and weather, and yet the great new life that can come from that. It's
Exactly.
like winter yielding to spring. And that
Right,
sort of
exactly. Well, there's cycles, and with this work we see there's big cycles, and even though there's tremendous grief in the family, say this family suffers from depression, they'll still have children. Sure, the children may carry the depression forward, but it's a new day, it's a new hope. This is what we were talking about. Every generation wants the next generation to make its dreams come true. Unfortunately, we carry some of their unfinished dreams with us, trying to make their dreams come true and not our dreams come true. So we have a fresh start. And I liken it to weather because people have such judgments about the Holocaust or World War II or the dramas and traumas. They're so entrenched with it they can't see a different view. With this work, we get a much larger view of everything in its totality. So having conscious totality, you have a conscious vision that you can see all the different forces at work. So some people, if there's a lot of sexual trauma in their family system, I say you came from a sexual tornado. That was going on in your family. Families who come from depression, you had dark clouds and heavy, heavy dark clouds and rain and suicide. That's the weather of your family system. And everyone's family system kind of has its own weather. So if we see it like that, a tornado may appear violent if you're in a mobile home park in Kansas and there's a tornado that destroys everything. But before humans were here, that tornado created the forests. All the seeds were spun around, and it created erosion and seeds, and a beautiful valley is there because something violent happened. So Hellinger also takes the bigger view that violence is created somewhere. It has some purpose, even though we can't see it in the present moment. There's going to be a positive effect after it, even though we can't see it because it might not happen in our lifetime. So everything has a cause and effect and a balance, and we try to look at those bigger forces in the work we do and how they show themselves in family system. So you could say Jewish family had an SS tornado in World War II that really blew them all up together and splattered them all down.
Right. Right. Well, that's what this work really helps you do, is to pull back and see the bigger picture.
Yes.
So often we get stuck in our little story and our little problems.
Yes.
This helps you see the big picture and really realize that you don't need to carry a lot of that stuff into the future.
Yeah, it wastes a lot of our life force, and what we're doing, I'm not saying I'm giving people life force, but when you're not distracted by completing an old drama of your great-grandparents or grandparents or carrying the grief for them because they died before anyone could say goodbye, And what we find with the work, I want to make sure I mention, is most of the drama and trauma in almost every human family, you start to see common factors. Hellinger sees it, I see it. It's lack of saying goodbye to someone who died. If you really boil so much down, humans can't handle death. I think most of us know we're kind of spiritual beings having a human experience, but I don't think we can handle someone dying or tragedy. A child dies, and I'm not saying it's not tragic, I'm in agreement with that, but the grief is so strong. So say we have people who have substance abuse issues, alcoholism, which there's much of that in many families. That used to be therapy, by the way. Before all psychotherapy and everything, people would have a drink to drown their issues or numb their pain because that's all that was available. So we don't judge that as bad.
It was a potable modality.
Yeah,
right?
it was your instant therapy. Have a cigarette or a drink, and I just killed Nazis. Let me have a drink. I can't take the guilt here. So we don't view that as bad, but when someone currently has issues, number one, they're copying the previous generations, but that alcohol actually was a cover-up for the grief. The pain that made people drink is actually grief. So when we go into someone's field who has substance abuse issue, it's sucking us right back to grief. And so alcoholism is a reaction to unexpressed grief. It's oversimplified. There's many complicated things, but if you really take it to its simplest common denominator, most negative behaviors in society today are really unresolved grief from a previous generation.
So that's what really needs to be addressed, is the grief or the anger or what's under the
Yes.
the symptom of substance abuse
And that's
alcohol.
that's what we mean by going to the source. That is the source. All the behaviors that are sure negative in society, doesn't look at them kindly or whatever, even all the sexual abuse that's coming out now, which is, not that I condone it in any way, but when you start to see who was secretly sexually abused in our grandparents' generation, who was the quiet victim in our great-grandparents' generation, in a way, all that is coming to the surface right now because it's been secret for 100, 150 years. The victims are speaking out, hey, this happened to me, pay attention here. And it offers a healing and cleansing just to purge the secrets. So with this work we do at a Constellation, a lot of dark stuff may come out. The client doesn't even have a recollection that this happened in their family. I tell them it would never show up in their conscious field if it didn't happen. People don't make the stuff up that happens in a constellation. We are guided to it by the ancestors who could have been sexually abused, saying, hey, I matter here. No one thought that in my lifetime. And so what we're doing, it's like, and we can't right the wrongs of what happened, but what we can do is diffuse the energy to see that, oh, that's been traveling. That's what I'm carrying in my life. And I had the same experience as my great-grandmother who was sexually abused. So we get to, by healing her great-granddaughter now and getting a healthy boundary and some clarity on what really went on, we're healing the heaven side as well, that they don't have to die suffering in silence that no one knew anymore. Now it's all out in the open. We hold that too with unconditional love so the energy can release and the client can move on and leave their victimization behind them and not carry it with them every day of their life.
Again, it's fascinating work. It's wonderful work. Again, his book is Many Hearts, One Soul, an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger, and it's fascinating. It can be used for all sorts of emotional issues as well as financial problems and
Yes.
other aspects. You said that the constellation work can actually be used for business purposes, or
Yes, so you can, it's called organizational constellations when you use them for business. Say you have 3 job offers. You're not sure which one to take. You're agonizing. Which one should I take? It could be a relationship. I'm dating 2 people. Should I marry this girl, but I really love this girl, whatever it is? You can set up surrogates to be those people and a surrogate for yourself as a representative in a constellation to see what your real heart and soul is drawn to. And so that's a good way to test things out, whether it's for career or whatever. One thing I wanted to mention about consciousness is in the constellation we're accessing the consciousness of totality. So we are physical beings, we have our physical DNA here, and we have energy that keeps us moving forward in the life force, but around that is a consciousness. Now, the yin and yang of that, there's also an unconsciousness or subconsciousness consciousness that is really guiding us. So in a case like that with organizational constellation, we're seeing where our subconscious really wants us to go. I had someone who's coming to the workshop, their visa ran out, he's a filmmaker, he did film school in LA. What country should I go to? I'm part of the European Union, it could be any country. We set up what he felt his choices were. Every time with different groups of people, Berlin, 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 Berlin. So his choice was to move to Berlin because 3 times in the field with different people representing him and the countries, Berlin came through.
And again, always blindly, right? You
Always
do the work
blindly. No one knew who or what they were, and the most positive connection to him was Berlin. So he said, well, that's where I'm going to start to work on being a film director. With my new education I got in Los Angeles. Okay. So it can help you. That's called an organizational constellation. A lot of the work that I spoke about earlier, we have all the people there, but I'm doing work on people's behalf from all over the world, whether it be England, Germany, Boston, New York, Florida. And so that's called distance constellation work. That's what I do a lot on Saturday nights, plus the clients who come to work. I've also developed the field. A lot of people in LA, being La La Land, are interested in reincarnation. So I developed applying the process to look at our past lives as well. So we can see, sure, we had this mission with our family, so to speak, and the lessons we're going to learn from our family, but we're spiritual beings coming to that family with our own different incarnations to learn bigger lessons. So I've developed a process for reincarnation. And about once a year around the holidays, I do a prophecy constellation where we set up every 6 months like a clock, a round circle with a clock, and just see what's happening in the current, going to happen in the current year, to see what the field of totality is going to tell us about the immediate future and what's going to happen.
Well, it's fascinating work. It's wonderful energy work, and it can be applied to all sorts of issues and problems, as we see. Mm-hmm. How can people contact you if they want to learn more about this?
Well, one thing I just wanted to make sure I mentioned, this really shows us that there's a oneness to all living things, mm-hmm. and I really want people to understand that. It's like we're really not separate from anything. So, you know, one thing I was thinking about today, it's like when I wrote the book, Many Hearts, One Soul, I really meant it when I put the one soul there. When you look at the interconnection of the people who come to my workshops who support other people's healing, it really shows that there really is kind of one spirit that binds us all. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I believe all religions have equal voice. All are valid. Whatever you believe is fine. There's no one is better than the other. But it shows you the oneness of all living things. And ironically, with my work, people start to see you're also one with the dead. And so the dead and the living have a very thin veil between them. And the interconnection we have. So in our work, when we help one, we're helping everyone in the family, but we're helping ourselves and our family. And on top of that, we're helping all of humanity learn something about World War II or some traumatic event that happened on Earth, or a national event that happened, or the potato famine in Ireland, whatever the case might be, slavery in Africa. We're all sharing in this human experience, and I believe everyone is connected in that kind of soul of humanity.
And that's how this work is able to work.
Yes.
Because
we all share that in common, so we have access. That's how we have access to the full consciousness. I call it the consciousness of totality, or we're coming into the age of totality. I sincerely believe, like with the Mayan calendar that's very popular right now, we are experiencing, right as we speak, I believe, the death of duality, the death of separation. It's collaborated by Native American tribes. All indigenous peoples have seen this coming. It's like the boundaries of thinking that you're not one or part of everything, and that equals man to earth. We can only destroy the earth so much. We're part of the earth. We have to work in unison with the earth and not just use it, destroy it, and defile it. We're one with the earth. We're one with the sky. We're one with the air molecules. So when you poison the water, you're poisoning your own blood. And I'm going to talk more about that in my forthcoming book, which I'm working on. But that really shows, in the paradigm of constellation, that really shows up how everything is interconnected. And the amazing thing, we can be doing the work here in Los Angeles on a distance case in Europe, and they get the results like that. Like there's no time and space.
Yes.
And quantum physicists are discovering there's really no time and space. It's an illusion. So then that'll come out scientifically. It's starting to come out anyway.
I think more and more people are starting to realize the symbiotic relationship between
Yes.
themselves and the Earth and themselves and other people. You mentioned quantum physicists are doing physical studies on energy work. And
Yes, and they are, and they're
is,
proving it. They're testing Buddhists, what happens to them during meditation, and the other thing with Rupert Sheldrake, who's a quantum physicist, has interviewed Hellinger because he said, how can you be in the death realm with the living simultaneously? And it's like all time and space is simultaneously. So one thing I didn't mention earlier, we'll just close with that, is time is a circle. A lot of people think it's linear, point A to point B, death, life. In constellations, we see it's a circle. And I'm living, but I'm in a circle of life and death with all the generations that came before me. And in a constellation process, we can tap any spoke in that wheel of a circle, or in our own incarnational space, as far as reincarnation, we're like a Ferris wheel in a circle, and every little bucket is our lifetime around this bigger wheel of life. So we're all sharing in the wheel of life together, kind of as one species, as one spirit, actually, having a human experience.
It's just wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely,
Today, Gary.
my pleasure
for
entirely.
anyone who wants to
yes,
get
I
in
have
touch
a
with you.
website. It's being reworked a bit right now, but it's up and running, and that's chifield.com, www.chifield.com. They'll be in the credits at the end of the tape. My name's Gary Stuart, and I have an 800 number you could call, 800-361-2692. You can find me on Facebook as Gary Stuart, and I'd love to hear from you. And I work with people all over the world, so you don't even have to be in LA to receive the work. Just contact me and we'll make it happen.
Thank you again. That was Gary Stuart, author of Many Hearts, One Soul, An American Perspective on the Work of Bert Hellinger. Thank you again, Gary, very much.
Oh, my namaste. Thank you.